a great pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much, Clive, for having me here. I hope you can hear me, just to confirm before I continue. Can you hear me, Clive or Bon?
Yes, we can hear you. Carry on, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Congratulations on the so many years of Immunopaedia. It's a long time, and hope there'll be 100 more years to come. We'll still have Immunopaedia. So I just wanted to share some things about capacity or building the next generation of scientists. But specifically, my talk will focus on building the next generation of Africa-based scientists. And I want to explain what I mean when I say Africa-based scientists so that we have context to what I'm about to talk about. So what I mean by Africa-based scientists is every scientist, irrespective of nationality, but based on the African continent. Every scientist, irrespective of nationality, based on the African continent. What I do not mean is any scientist, African or non-African, working in Africa from abroad. So I'm talking about how to build the capacity while people remain on the continent, or they will go and come back, but primarily they are based on the continent and do work on the continent. So I just want to first to share my own experience so that it will make sense as context as we go forward and I talk about some of the concepts on this topic. So in my case, I'm a Malawian. I'm based in Malawi. I was trained primarily in Malawi in my earlier years, but then went to the UK and to the US to later during my training. So this just shows you that did my undergrad years in Malawi, and then went to do my postgrad years in the UK, did my master's in the UK and PhD in the UK, then moved to the US. But what I wanted to highlight here is in the middle of this process, there is an internship which I did, which really helped me to cement my idea of wanting to be an immunologist. So there's this internship which I mentioned here, and I'll mention it again as we go on, because we have used this effectively, and this is about 22 years ago that I did this internship. But I still use this approach to train the next generation of scientists because it really gives them a springboard. And this is just to show you my journey from postdoc to independence. And that the other I wanted to highlight here is that in the process, I have been privileged to win 3 international fellowships from 3 different major funders. So from the Wellcome between 2015 2019, and then from the MRC FCDO 2019 2023, and recently the Callistus Juma Science Leadership Fellowship from the Gates Foundation. So, and also this is important as I go forward, you understand why I'm talking about fellowships. When I came back to Malawi after my postdoc in the US to establish my own group, I also took on an opportunity to train to support the institution. The Malawi-Liverpool-Wellcome program is one of the overseas programs of the Wellcome Trust. There are 5 of them, 3 in Africa, 2 in Asia, Southeast Asia. They are centers of excellence, and this is just at my time when I was leading the training program here at MOW. We had over 85% African. The transition rate, that means if people are doing internships from pre-MSc to PhD, or from pre-BSc to MSc, and these are in terms of people getting international recognized or international scholarships to transition to do their next qualification, was about 86%, and we had about 62% of female representation within this training program, about 163 active trainees. So it's a lot of trainees, but and I'm very happy that I managed to contribute to this. Before my chairmanship, I think we had about 40 to 45% were females. So this shift over the years is something that I'm very proud of as an achievement. The other thing is that I'm involved in training Africa-based scientists through one of the programs that Clive leads, the infectious diseases in Africa, which I was part of in 2011, and I've been part of ever since, from a trainee to a faculty since up to today. And also I'm part of the flow cytometry workshop, which happens alongside with this infectious disease in Africa, usually in Cape Town. And also there's another program that I've been involved in It's called the AfriBOP, which is Africa Biology of Parasites, Parasitology, and can't remember other things, but it really is an immunology focused course as well. It happened that this year was actually in Malawi. It happens in Malawi and Kenya alternatively. So next year it'll be in Kenya, the other year it'll be in Malawi. But I've also been faculty of this over the years. It's all trains Africa-based scientists, really. That's the focus. So just giving you some snapshot of the background. I just want to show some of the lessons that I've learned from this process up to this point of training Africa-based scientists. So one of the things that I've managed to gather, either whether from working in Malawi or in the other countries, is really these gaps and barriers that hinder career progression of early career researchers and mid-career researchers in LMICs. In this case, these are mostly focused in sub-Saharan Africa. In terms of the structural barriers, there are issues of absence of institutionalized training in grant writing and grantsmanship. Most universities and most academic institutions are really teaching focused and less about research. Even when they're research focused, there's not really institutionalized training in terms of grant writing and grantsmanship. There's limited pool of experienced peer reviewers to critique grant applications, so that actually affects the whole process. There's inadequate budget support due to lack of knowledge of funder-specific budgeting requirements. So what that means is if you write your grant and most of the costs you put there are disallowable, obviously you're going to lose out when that thing is awarded. So you really need that intelligence from the operations team of the professional services in the university or research institution. There's usually limited grant intelligence due to limited exposure and capacity in research light institutions. And these are a lot of them in Africa. Most of them are teaching focused, like I said. And also, usually, there's suboptimal support for women researchers, especially those with caring responsibilities. And these are the structural responsibilities, structural barriers and hindrances. When you go on the individual level hindrances, you also continue to find this suboptimal support for women researchers that I just mentioned. You also find it at individual level. But also, there's lack of protected time for grant writing due to competing in priorities, especially, like I said, in teaching heavy institutions or project funded early career researchers or mid career researchers. And some of you who are on this call, you'd agree with me of these things that you have experienced them yourself or you have seen others experience them, including things like inadequate grant writing skills, like I said already, on the structural barriers. You can also find this at an individual level barrier and follows with limited mentorship, especially specifically on grantsmanship, not just mentorship in general, but on grantsmanship, how to write competitive grants. Is people have brilliant ideas on the continent, but how to package a grant for specific funders is not always that easy. And also, of course, the obvious one, fear of rejection or failure due to inadequate preparation and suboptimal support. So making people not to apply when these opportunities arise. So one of the things that I have found as a way, this is my own synthesis of what I've learned to date in my career, is that to retain scientists on the continent that of high quality, really these are, I think, the six things that we need to focus on. The first one is on retain the R is you need to have competitive remuneration. So we need to pay people at a standard that is competitive. Otherwise, they will leave the continent and go elsewhere. So we need to reward people accordingly. The other thing is to have a culture of excellence. The reason why most people don't want to spend time on the continent to do their work is really sometimes it has to do with excellence in the place that they're doing their research. They also have to have opportunities for further training, which is an important component when you are in these universities outside Africa, for example, in Europe or in the US. There are so many opportunities for training, ad hoc training, all kinds of training that you take, soft skills that you learn. They need to have those in sight, as well as timely access to resources is a very important component as well. Because that if you don't have access to resources, access to equipment, then you can't really do the high impact science that you want to do. And also, it has to have impactful research. It's not just about doing research for the sake of it. If you can show that the research somebody is being recruited to or they'll be doing will be impactful, it really gives them a purpose on why to do that research. And of course, most importantly, if in academia to publish, you really need scientific novelty of the work. So when you add these things up, you have the acronym RETAIN, which I feel if you cover these areas, you're likely going to return and do more work on the continent while developing your career at a competitive level like anybody else in this world. That's one of the reasons why I find myself in Malawi, because all these things that I talk about here, I have them around, makes me to stick around and to do more and to support the next generation. So, in terms of, I've talked about problems. Let me talk about some of the solutions. I've talked about the barriers. So some of the solutions, in our case, in my case, what I decided to do is first and foremost, I established something really called it's a Science for All. So Science for All is a foundation that I established. It has different aspects to it. So we have Science for All clubs in all the public universities in Malawi. They're called Science for All clubs, and we have a curriculum in secondary schools where we have Science for All clubs as well, where they go through different aspects of science to learn as early as possible the components that they would use if they decided to take a science career, basically a science career, because that's important to build confidence and to build interest. We have the National Science Quiz, the only science quiz in Malawi. Science is called the McFarlane Mbewe National Science Quiz. It's also run through the Science for All, which we established several years ago. Now it's run nationally. We have Science for All pre-bachelor's internship program. So we take students while they're in college, before they finish their bachelor's, they come to the institution, the Malawi-Liverpool-Wellcome program, and the shadow scientists, and they learn concepts of research, concepts of science very early on. So when they finish the bachelor's programs, they will now be able to make the decisions whether to take science as a career or not. And most of them will retain them, and they're actually very brilliant young men and women. So last year, we are fortunate to be among the finalists for the Breakthrough Science Engagement of the Year. So this is an international award under the Falling Walls Foundation. It happens every year and mostly hosted in Germany. And we were one of the finalists. Actually, our program was really highly recommended. The other thing is that within my group, I call my group the Infection and Immunity Group. One of the key things that we do is the science and training strategy. What I have done is that I incorporate the two together. So as part of every project that I win in terms of writing grants, I always incorporate in there bachelor's, pre-bachelor's, pre-MSc or pre-masters and pre-PhD internships. So usually between 6 months to 1 year. And this is building young scientists into the actual research programs. And this has been very helpful because most of these eventually get international scholarships, but eventually come back and start to build their own careers in science. I also provide for PhD studentships within these projects so that it's a two-way thing. Wherever there's a research project, there's a training component to it. So that's one of the solutions that others can emulate if they already do, which is good. If they are not, this is something of the things we can think about in order to support more scientists on the continent. The other component is that after looking at all these gaps and barriers, especially those faced by ECRs and MCR, myself and my colleagues here at the Malawi-Liverpool-Wellcome program approached the Wellcome Trust to establish what we called the Discovery Research Support Hub, which I lead. Really, this is an initiative that is there to support early and mid-career scientists in developing internationally competitive grant applications for either the Wellcome Discovery Research schemes or other fellowships that are relevant to low middle income countries. And we want to significantly contribute to building a sustainable and representative international competitive science leadership in Africa, promoting diversity, inclusivity, and equity. So there is this initiative has a website, www.drsh.mw. You can find much of the information on that. But really, it tries to tackle those gaps and barriers I spoke about in the earlier slides. So some of the activities that we do under this, the services we offer, we have webinars on grantsmanship, on grant writing. We have peer review that we offer to people that want to submit to their application. We do interview preparation if they're shortlisted. We have writing boot camps, about 2 or 3 weeks, where people, we pay for everything to make sure they go out somewhere else and have a boot camp where they write. They have an objective of producing a grant when they go for writing. We have scheme-specific mentorship programs. We link people up with people that have either been awarded those fellowships before or sit on fellowship committees that they're going to give them clear insights on the competitiveness of their applications way before they submit it in the writing phases. We also offer flexible seed grants. These are about £10,000. The flexible seed awards, these are we give them to candidates to do, as long as they justify, they can do really pretty much everything they want to do with it, whether to generate new preliminary data, or to travel to a lab that they want to gain a skill, or for women with caring responsibilities, they want to go to a particular conference and they need to carry their maid or help. We're able to pay for that to make sure that nobody's left behind. And then, of course, we have knowledge and networking events as part of the hub. So this is really an important, we think it's an important initiative, and we'll see how it bears fruit in the next couple of years. The other thing that we have done is to make sure we harness excellent science on the continent rather than exporting the science. So one of the things that I'm also involved in, I'm leading this initiative, is we're calling it the Africa-Asia Single Cell Genomics Initiative, which is really an initiative to build single cell capacity and technology within the continent, as well as in Asia, through the Africa-Asia programs. And this is actually under review by the Wellcome, the application for this. But we think this is one way of trying to democratize important technology that will help us to do discovery science on the continent. So this is really in partnership with the Oxford University, the Sanger Institute, the Human Cell Atlas, and the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. So hopefully, with our fingers crossed, hopefully we'll have something concrete in the next couple of months. Similarly, on the other front of serology, so the last 2 weeks, I think, or 3 weeks, I hosted the 2025 Second Summit on Integrated Multiplex Cell Surveillance. So really, this is a program where we are trying to use serology to as a surveillance tool, and to advocate that it gets taken up by ministries of health to use part of routine surveillance. As most of you are aware, during COVID, we used a lot of surveillance platforms across the continent and in many countries. But after COVID, they have not been really, people have not gone back to them mostly, but really they were very helpful. So we want to see if we can make this as routine as possible. So I hosted this conference in Malawi. We also had a cell analytics workshop, which is the component of this workshop, where we had, this is international actually summit, but we also had a workshop for LMIC-based trainees, about 35 of them hosted at MOW, which we ran a analytics workshop, how to analyze serological data, how to make models of serological data, how to infer that of what's happening actually in the community or in the populations. So that's what I've used the knowledge to do to try to develop the next generation of scientists. But I also want to talk a bit about the future. What do I see the future to look like? One thing I want to remind us is that what might be different in the world in the next 10 years. First and foremost, just looking at population demographics, there will be an increased young African population. We know that because the demography tells us so. There'll be more African, the youngest population in Africa, obviously, the world is Africa, and there'll be more young Africans. And there'll be an aging population in Europe and in Asia. At the same time, there'll be a lot of mixed race populations will grow. And we know that happening every time. That means there'll be increased genetic diversity in the world globally. And that is very important because that could actually impact the immunology that we do. Yeah. So the other thing is that there is already a global shift, and there'll be even more shift from communicable diseases to more non-communicable diseases. So for the next generation of scientists, these are the kind of things you should be thinking about. This is the direction that the world is going, and you can take advantage of this to position yourself to what will be happening in the future. Otherwise, we'll be left behind if we don't do anything about this. This is another thing that I think is happening. There's a lot of now talk of personalized medicine, yeah, or precision medicine, and that's something you can't ignore. So in the developed world, most of that's the direction we're taking. I don't think so in this part of the world, and in LMICs, we have the luxury to do personalized medicine at this point. What we do normally is traditional global health, but there is this balance between the traditional global health and personalized medicine. Is that I think we should be really investing our money into, because then that what it does is, one, it has wider impact than personalized medicine. At the same time, it's value for money because you're really not In the traditional global health, what we do is that you give a vaccine to every human being. You give them the same way. For example, in an age group or like that, or in a community. While in precision global health, what we're saying is that you can target specific vaccination strategies for specific groups because not everything else works the same. In this case, it's a balance between personalized medicine and traditional global health, which is actually called, now we're calling it precision global health. Another thing, what do I think will be the enablers for this key progress? One, remember, there's the emergence of quantum computing and AI. If you go back to the history of computing, you realize from where we started was a huge computers to these small laptops we have. Now we're getting into even much more functional computers in quantum computing, which will help us to analyze data much, much quicker and large data sets. The other thing that's important is equitable collaboration. That will be very important going forward. Because otherwise, if we don't do this and focus on this, especially people in the MICs, we will be left behind, and that is not what we want. If we want to focus on what do we really already know and what we can build on or learn from, we now have a lot of proliferation of biological models. For example, for immunology and other components, we used to have 2D cultures, we have gone to 3D cultures, even 3D microphysiology cultures, and there's so much organ on chip. There are many technologies that have now just exploded that we need to take advantage of. We have nanoparticle delivery platforms, new generation of vaccines or delivering therapeutics in specific parts or in specific sections or organs. All that is already existent that we can build on. We have the CRISPR gene editing technology that we should be building on. AI protein structure prediction, for example, AlphaFold3, are some of the things we should be building on, and including the mRNA vaccine technology. So you see, there's a lot of things that have happened in the last couple of years, a huge proliferation of technologies, a huge proliferation of possibilities that scientists on the African continent need to start to take advantage of this going forward much more. So I will stop there, and I just want to acknowledge all these people that are on this slide, and most importantly to Clive for all the work you do for the continent and really for the immunology field. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Kondwani. The room is clapping. I think we can take some questions because I think you opened something up which is very important, and I think the 93 people online. Any questions? We have someone purveying or in the room. Any questions for Kondwani? Okay. No one wants to know how to tap into this funding, these fellowships?
Clive, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to ask. That was an excellent presentation, Kondwani. So thank you very much, Kondwani. I was just wondering whether you have some ideas that you could share about. There's been a lot of effort into building the technologies and making sure that institutions and individuals, researchers in Africa are competitive at the global level. But what do you think we need to do in order to translate that capacity that is now being developed in Africa into real sort of innovation, so that we are not just doing the research and producing outstanding research, but can actually translate this into innovations? I'm thinking here about commercialization of the technology into vaccines, drug interventions, diagnostics, and so on and so forth, because clearly that's something that is we still haven't achieved very much in Africa. We still continue to rely quite a bit on products that are coming from other countries. Could you just comment on that?
Brilliant question, Tumbi. And I spent time thinking a lot about that too. And actually, maybe, anyway, I'll share it, which is I myself have recently registered a biotech. really to go afar and above and beyond what we normally do, just do things for academic purposes and getting publications. But I think one of the challenges is really we don't collaborate enough on the continent amongst ourselves. A lot of the collaboration is between African scientists and European scientists, or African scientists and American scientists, or African scientists and Canadian scientists, and so on and so forth. There's very little amongst ourselves, which I think that would help a lot. I would want one day to see biotech companies that's on the continent that are beyond one nationality on the continent. So where you have several Africa-based scientists coming together with colleagues even in the diaspora to start to establish biotech companies. I have a colleague in Ghana who inspires me a lot, who has his own biotech with African scientists in diaspora as well as himself. It's growing now. It's early days, but that's the kind of stuff we want to see. Once we start to create possibilities like that, then even the trainees that are coming before us, they will see the possibility and see a way. Because what they see now is that they all they see us doing is publishing that nice nature paper, that nice science paper, and that's all it ends up to be. So yeah, so that's what I have my thoughts on that. Thank you.
There's an alarm going off here. What? Is a fire alarm?
Malakala, you can ask your question.
Hi, Kondwani. Thank you for that excellent talk. I'm a great fan of the capacity development work you're doing at Malawi-Liverpool Wellcome program. So my question is more on more cooperations between Global South to Global South, partnerships. And I'm aware that you're already doing that through the Asia-Africa programs, but those that are largely pioneered by funding from Wellcome Trust. But do you think there are roles for instance, councils or academies of science, or maybe societies that would be in multiple countries like Malawi, South Africa, Kenya, and so on, that would actually facilitate such partnerships, mainly focusing on the same model of capacity development in Global South to South partnerships? Thank you.
Thanks, Sir Jackson. Yeah, true. There are those opportunities, and actually sometimes I feel like, yes, we're using a lot of funding from that is not our own on the continent, but there are other things. Like I think I suggested some things that we do here. That every research project that I have, for example, will have interns on there. So other than recruiting a research assistant, I recruit a research intern. It's the same amount of money, but it's a different focus. You're focusing on training somebody other than just them doing work for the project. And those kind of things, you can actually do it in a way where you collaborate amongst different labs on the continent. So if, for example, if you are collaborating with labs in South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, you could actually even go to the local research councils. Almost every country in Africa has what they call science commissions. They have different names according to where you are, but those are the kind of stuff that you could go get funding for example, for travel. So people to visit other labs. And the main funding really coming from research projects to actually do projects themselves that amongst PIs can collaborate on without us seeking for extra funding from outside the continent to do that work. So there are other creative things we could do better without asking new money, using the existing money we have, but building really networks that focus on training really these high quality scientists on the continent. Because I'm fortunate enough to have gone and met many different African young scientists. I think they're absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Let's move on in that case. Right. Oh yeah, the question, and then this will be the last one.
Okay, so someone in the Q&A asked the question: how did you personally develop yourself as a young African to surmount the limitations of an early career researcher to becoming a stakeholder in African research or in the African research community? You mentioned that your internship in the early 2000s was pivotal for you?
Correct. I think one of the key aspects of all this is really having mentorship is key, is what I can tell you. Mentorship is key. And when you're giving opportunities, this is one thing I realized. When you're giving opportunities, give it your all. If you deliver, people would want to continue working with you. And that's the key aspects, other than giving excuses. So yeah, it's really difficult to establish a career in science in Africa, but sometimes you can use that to your advantage. So I can give you a simple example. I know this is a global audience, but I can say these things, almost all of us face these things. You can go to a conference where people don't expect much from you. And instead of complaining that African scientists are marginalized and that, which is true, you can actually go there and just show that you are as equal as them, anybody else, in the kind of work you're doing. And usually what happens is because you are already coming from the point where you are being underestimated, whatever you do, if it's brilliant and excellent, it actually multiplies the effect. So that's one of the ways that you can just strive for excellence. When you are given an opportunity as a young scientist, take it with both hands. Excuses don't make careers, they actually break them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kondwani.